Welcome to Thez Nutz Garage, and today we're going to be working on our 1994 F-150, and what we're going to be doing is swapping out the engine. All right, so like I said in the intro, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be swapping out the engine in our 1994 F-150. Now, if you haven't seen the video where I went and bought this truck, I'll put a link up here and you can go watch that video. But I only paid $300 for this truck. And when I bought it, it had a severe rod knock. And with that, we brought it home, and since it had a severe rod knock, we kind of nicknamed the truck Rodney Knox. So if you hear me refer to the truck as Rodney, you'll know I'm talking about the original one. Now, this engine swap that we're going to be doing is going to have several parts to it, several different scenarios, we'll call them. And scenario one is what this video is going to be about. And what that's going to be is just going and finding an engine in a salvage yard or a wrecked truck. Like what we did, we found a truck, same year, same engine, basically the same truck that had been T-boned, and we pulled the engine out of it. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put the link right up here. So in scenario one, we have our engine. And what we're trying to do is just replace it as quick as we can and get it out of the wrecked truck and into our truck. Now, you could have found an engine at a salvage yard and be doing the same scenario. Just where it came from was from the salvage yard, not from a wrecked truck. So we're wanting to get this engine in the truck as quick as we can. But now, since we have this engine from the donor truck here, and before we put it in our truck, we need to address some issues. Issue number one is that it has a major oil pan leak. The oil pan this truck's 26 years old or so. So it's just basically dry rotted, and it's just leaking oil like a sieve, you know, just bad. So we want to fix that. So what I did was I ordered a complete gasket set for this engine. It was $75 off eBay. I think the ones on at AutoZone or O'Reilly's are around $100. Same gasket set. And what it does, it includes all the gaskets that you're going to need to rebuild this engine. Now, I'm not going to rebuild this engine, but I was like, well, it's cheaper to buy the whole set than it is to piecemeal all these different gasket sets together. And then I'll have gaskets for later on if I need them for another build, or this engine later on if something goes wrong. So we have a complete gasket set. While we've got the oil pan off, we might as well replace the oil pump. So that way we can put a little bit better life into the engine with a new pump, maybe that's not as wore out as this one. And since we got that off, what we need to do is we're going to be removing our timing chain cover. We're going to need to replace that gasket. The front seal in that timing chain cover. Also replace the rear seal. And since we got the timing chain cover off, we might as well replace the timing chain and the gears that are in there. Now, this engine has a water pump. Rodney's engine has a water pump, but I don't know either one of them, and I don't really trust either one of them. So what I'm going to do is I'll be replacing the water pump. While we're there, these are things what you call while I was there repairs. Let's go ahead and get them done now, because what could happen later on down the road, 3 months, 6 months, a year, is this oil pump could go out, lose the engine. Timing chain could break, lose the engine. So let's just go ahead and replace them and get them ready to give this engine a little bit of new life. Now, some of the other gaskets I'm going to replace is the valve cover gaskets. Now, on this engine, they're not leaking, but since I'm kind of tearing it apart, I might as well replace them. The other thing I have to do in order to replace the valve cover gaskets is I have to remove the upper part of the pelham of the intake. I'll remove that so I can get those valve covers off. And well, since I got that off, what I'm going to do is replace the fuel injectors in this engine. And I know you're thinking, well, I don't want to go buy new fuel injectors. Well, you wouldn't have to, and the only reason that I have these fuel injectors is because I bought them for my 99, and they take the same fuel injectors. And I have a brand new one sitting over here, and I'm like, well, since I've got it apart, I'll put the new ones in it. So once we do all that, get the engine put back together, we'll be putting a new belt on it, and we'll be putting some oil in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this engine for about 300 to 500 miles with some cheaper oil. And I think I got some Quaker State 1020 over here. And once I run it about 500 miles or 300 to 500 miles, I'm going to flush. What I'm basically trying to do is flush this engine out, get all the gunk and the stuff in the oil passages out of it. What I'm going to do is, this engine is a test engine. I'm going to be transitioning it into using AMSOIL motor oil. Now, I'm proud to say that AMSOIL is our very first sponsor to this channel, and that is Eagle Lubricants out of Texas. Now, as I'm doing some of these videos, you'll hear me give a plug to Eagle Lubricants for supplying some of these parts for this truck, the oil, and they've actually sent us a whole entire box full of stuff to test out. And there's going to be several videos with us testing out some of their products. So I would like to give a shout out to Eagle Lubricants and say thank you very much for being our very first sponsor. Now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to start taking this engine apart and putting these gaskets on it and getting all of this stuff ready to get this engine prepped.
Like a bird on a tree, I'm just sitting here.
All right, so now I got the engine mounted to the engine stand, and basically, as you've seen in the video, I just mounted this black mounting point to the back of the engine, and then I just slid this red lower part of the engine stand on it, and that's just a lot easier way to get that engine on this stand. Now, going over the engine real quick, the valve covers, like I said, aren't leaking. One thing I'm not going to replace or take off are the exhaust manifolds. They have a very bad habit of breaking bolts, and then you got to drill that out, and it just takes a lot of time. It's not leaking, they're not cracked, so I'm just going to leave them on there. But what I do have to remove is this upper part of the intake, which is, I think, what they call the pilum. Basically, it's just got some bolts that go down each side, bolted in. Also, here's the fuel rail, the shiny rod there, that's the fuel rail, one on each side. This is the injector. And one thing about these engines is I start taking a lot of these electronics and the emissions, the vacuum lines off of this engine, is you have to be very careful because they're old and they're brittle. And I already have broken one of these injector plugs. And what I'll do is I'll try to remove this one off of the engine and then use the one off of Rodney, its harness, to replace this, so that way I don't have any broken. Now, if one of them does get broke, what I may have to do is just come in, splice the wires, and put a newer plug on it and be done with it. So I'm gonna get started tearing this apart. I'll put it on time lapse and let you follow along. And then when we get the top part kind of torn down, what we'll do is we'll flip the engine over and start working on the oil pan. Now, one thing when you're doing this, there's going to be a million bolts on this, and what I'm going to do is what I call it bag it and tag it. I have a box down here. I have actually I took the flywheel off, and that's the bag with the flywheel bolts. Label all your bolts, put them in bags so that way you don't lose them. If you have parts like hoses, if you want to, you can take some masking tape, write what it is and its location on the masking tape, and then put the masking tape around the hose. There's a lot of little things that you can do to keep up with what you're doing. Like if you remove a bolt or a nut, put it back on there so that way you don't lose it. What I'm gonna do is I'll number all my spark plug wires, because I'm gonna have to remove my wires in my distributor cap. What I'll do is I'll just number them all to where they go, so that way when I get ready to reinstall them, I know exactly where they go at on the engine. All right, so as you can see, I've removed the wires. I kind of just numbered this, probably not in the right order, but that's just how I number them. What I'm going to start doing now is I'm fixing to get ready to take this top part of this intake off. And as you can see, I have a lot of leaves and dirt and all this stuff down in here. Before I go break and open this engine, I want to make sure I clean all of this out. I got a shop vac, I can vacuum some of this out, or I have a compressor, I can blow some of the debris away from the engine. I just don't want to take this off and then something fall down in it. And then right after I take this off, what you'll see me do is I'm going to put some tape over the whole top of it, so that way no debris falls down in that intake while I'm working on it. But I got to finish removing some stuff on the intake, like this wiring harness here. Looks like this wiring harness is free. Got something way down here, so probably what I'll have to do is take this off, take this hose off, get rid of this piping on this EGR, and remove this. And then I also have this to remove. And then that way I can take this whole top part of the intake off and set it to the side. So I'm gonna get started on that and I'll come back. Alright, so I've got the pelham off the intake. I've also got the valve covers off, and the valve cover gaskets were really good. Now I know why they weren't leaking, because they're kind of a hard metal with some rubber coating on it. Really nice. But I got both sides off. I'm fixing to take the fuel rails off and probably get ready to flip the motor over and start removing the oil pan. But I'm trying to clean up the valve covers, and I've got my own little parts washer over here I've made. That's basically a sump pump that I had, and that's some purple power in there, and I'm just letting it circulate around them. I'm gonna do my oil pan the same way. I'm fixing to scrub these down and rinse them off. They don't have to be perfect, but I would like to throw a quick coat of paint on them, just so that way they're covered. It probably be something that I have on the shelf over there. I'm not really worried about the color of it really, but I just want to get something on, because you can see that right there's got a spot of metal showing, so just throw something on it. But I'm going to get back to doing this engine and get it to where I can flip it over. Alright, so we got the engine flipped upside down now, and yeah, you can really see how dirty this oil pan is, and just how shot the gasket is. I mean, it's literally out, all the way out. So we're going to go ahead and remove this brand spanking new oil filter they got on here, and remove our engine mounts, remove our oil pan here, and then we'll work our way down to the timing chain cover. on this side. Not as bad, but it's still pretty dingy. So we'll get this torn apart, and then we'll get to look inside of it and start getting ready to replace that oil pump. All right, so here's our oil pan, and what it's going to take is a 10 millimeter socket, and I think this is a 13 millimeter. You got a 13 millimeter on the front, on each side of the hump, and you also have 2 on the very back. Since I'm taking this off, I'll probably just work my way from the inside out. Like I said earlier, I'm bagging and tagging all my nuts and bolts. That way I don't lose any. These are pretty dingy. Probably what I'll do is try to clean them up before I put them back in. All right, so it looks like we got this little, I guess these are some sort of metal spacers. They probably help distribute the pressure on the oil pan evenly along the sides. So we're gonna keep these, we'll probably clean them up before we reinstall those. And then let's just see what we got underneath this hot mess. Trying to be careful because it's just so dirty. I'm trying to roll it, maybe pick it straight up, take it to the side. All right, and so now that we got the pan off, now we'll go ahead and take off our engine mounts, and you can tell that right there is just ripped in half. It's no good, so it needs to go. This one's better, but it still needs to come off of there. What that'll do is when we go to reinstall our pan, these aren't there, it'll just make it a lot easier. Our gasket, it'll make it a lot easier. But you can see right here, I guess you can or can't, this gasket right here is just completely separated and pushed apart like that. That's pretty shabby. So what I'm gonna do is as I'm pulling this gasket up, I'm just trying to, won't tear it, maybe. I'm trying to just pull it away from the engine so any of this trash doesn't go in the engine. I might have to cross over. Oh yeah, this gasket is just shot. I sure don't want to get any of this gasket material down in there. Yeah. What we got now is we got this gasket is still kind of stuck. Just gonna try to dig it out a little bit. You wanna make sure you get all that out of there, because if you don't, your next gasket ain't gonna seal right. Down in here, you come around this hump, there's a little indentation. You wanna make sure you get all the gasket material out of there, because your new gasket's gonna go in that, and you just ain't gonna be able to, they both won't fit in there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean this up, remove these, and go ahead and start cleaning up this area for where the gasket's gonna sit, and then we'll come back and then we'll be replacing the oil pump. All right, so before we take the motor mounts off, what I need to do is start kind of working on this timing chain cover here. And I probably am not doing this right. There she comes. Come on, baby. All right, so we got our timing chain cover off. Here's gonna be our seal. We're gonna be replacing this seal. So we'll set this to the side. And now what we'll do is like I said, we'll take the motor mounts off, get ready to put the oil pump on, and get ready to put our timing chain on. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get ready to install our new oil pump. I've got the block cleaned up where the oil pan's gonna go. We got the timing chain cover off, got all that area cleaned up. And what we need to do, like I said, is install our new oil pump. Well, from here, all the way around here, that's a pickup tube, and we're gonna reuse it. Probably what I'll do is I'll take it off, clean it up real quick, and then put it back on. But the first thing we have to do is remove our old oil pump. And this is kind of in a spot. I'm just hoping I can, there it goes. Just gonna loosen up all the bolts for right now. And this right here, the oil pump bolts, they're like a 9/16 or something. And then I think this nuts here for the pickup tube, I think they're 13s. I'm just going to first remove this pickup tube, get it out of the way. And all I'm wanting to do is just rinse it out, just so in case there's anything in it. This is a 15 millimeter or probably a 9/16. I'm just going to take this off and it just pops off. We'll have to clean up this right here. This is an old gasket. Since we're going to be reusing this, we'll have to clean this up. Since we're not reusing this, we're not going to worry with it. Take our bolts out. We're just going to pull straight up on it. Throw that down there. Now you can see here's a little rod that's coming up. That's what drives the oil pump from the distributor. So when we put our new oil pump back on, we want to make sure we line that up just right. All right, so I'm gonna clean up the pickup tube and get this ready to install, and I'll be right back. All right, so now we're gonna get ready to install our oil pump. This smaller gasket goes here, and then we have a larger gasket here, and it's gonna go basically here, which goes down here by the engine. like so. Like that right there. So I'm putting it down. I tore a little bit off because that little bit was hitting this part of the crank. So now I told you earlier that we had to line up this rod with this little hole right here, and that's where this rod that drives this oil pump goes into. If you don't have that seated right, or you don't have this installed, your oil pump's not going to run. It's going to basically lock up your engine. So you have to get this kind of lined up as you sit it down, like that. Now this gasket I'm putting on here is dry, doesn't have any gasket sealer or anything on it. I'm just going to go ahead and kind of snug these up, and then we'll torque them down. I'm hoping I can torque this one side over here down. I don't have a wobble socket, and I broke it, so I'm kind of short on it. I'm hoping I can actually that's that one. Alright. So now that we have this one torqued, now what we're going to do is go ahead and put in our pickup tube. Like I said, I cleaned off this piece here. Basically it just goes there. We have our new gasket. I'm just going to take one here and stick it to the top, line it through the gasket. It'll be dry too. That was a 13 millimeter. Put this nut on. Like I said, it's a 15 millimeter, I believe. All right, I'm gonna torque these at 20. Don't have to be a lot. I did these at 25, so. All right, so now we have our oil pump installed. And what I did with the oil pump is I did take this cover off, and I did put a little, I'll call it the red kind of grease, just a little bit in there, so that way when it starts up, it's not dry. I just put a very light coat in there, so that way when it starts up, it has a little bit of lubrication. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put our timing chain on. All right, so now we have this timing chain. Now this engine is inverted. It is upside down still because we still have to put all the gaskets on it, and it's just easier to work this way. So the first thing I need to do is we have our alignment dots aligned up. We have this one facing down and this one facing up. Now once we take this chain off and these gears off, we're not going to try to move anything top or bottom of this engine, so that way we don't get it out of alignment. That's our goal. So first thing I'm going to do is I have my spark plugs removed, so that way it's easier to kind of rock the lower end to line it up with the top end. So first things first, let me take this nut back off. And I'm using an impact just because it's less likely of a chance it's gonna make any of this move. All right, so next thing we're gonna do is we're undo this bolt. And we're still lined up. Maybe there's a trick to this. Ooh, that's it. That's a trick. Just wiggle it. So we're going to take it off. Just slide it off. I'm actually going to kind of slide it back and forth just a little bit to get that shaft up there a little smooth. All right, so we're going to take it off. Now here's our new timing chain. I'm going to put it on here. And before I actually put it on, what I want to do is compare the old gear and the new gear just to make sure that they're the same. And they look pretty much the same to me. So we know this back piece is going to go back there. Like so. So it's going to go in like this. And you can see here's my alignment pin. I'm trying to make sure that's up because our other gear has to, alignment pin has to be facing down. I'm opening up this package. So you can see here's the alignment pin. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. So since this one's supposed to be facing, in this scenario, up, and this one's supposed to be facing down, this actually has a keyway on it. So I'm gonna try to get them kind of lined up just by holding them up in the air. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm just trying to get them lined up. You can still see this kind of off a tooth. All right, so I think I have it pretty good right there. So what I'm going to do is slide the top one on first because it does have a keyway. All right. Now, I know y'all gonna believe this is hard to believe, but this is the first time I've ever put a timing chain on in my life. And that lined up perfectly. I didn't have to rock the lower end to get it to line up or anything, so. And it's tight. So we're gonna take this little nut and put that back on, our bolt back in there. And we'll go ahead and put that one back in because what I want to do is once I get it on, I'm going to want to turn it a couple of times just to make sure that it's good and aligned up. All right, so I will torque this, but first what I want to do is just spin this over a couple of times just to make sure it's moving freely. Coming back around, checking our pins, make our alignment dots, and make sure they're aligned. And that they are. Alrighty, so day has turned to night. And I'm still out here working on this. I have gotten my timing chain cover put back on and my new water pump. I also have a new oil pressure sending unit I've put on there. I'm getting ready to install my oil pan gasket. And what I'll do is when I get ready to put it on here, I'll walk you through it real quick. It's not going to be much. But you can see I just kind of got it laid out. What I'm waiting for now is for this to finish up drying. That's the oil pan that come off of this truck, and if you could have seen earlier, it was just horrible, just dirty and full of oil and dirt. I used my homemade parts washer right there, and if y'all want to see how I made that, just comment down below and I'll show you how I made it. It was just from stuff I had laying around. This light's gonna be kicking on and off, sorry. But I'm painting my pulleys and my harmonic balancer there. Over here I have my valve covers. They're painted. Got those painted. I also have, this is what I'm really waiting on to dry. These little metal brackets here. These are what go around the bottom of the oil pan and make it to where it distributes the pressure across the bottom of the pan evenly. So as soon as those gets dry, I'm gonna put this oil pan back on. All right, so I've got the started putting my oil pan gasket on. Basically, I went in and put a little strip of silicone right in here. That's where the timing chain cover and the block meet. Did it on the other side. Also put a little silicone down in here before I put this gasket on. What you call the four corners. 2 in the front and then the 2 in the back. I also put in the back here, before I put down the gray, this is the oil pan gasket. Before I put it down, I actually put a bead of silicone below the gasket, and then I've put the gasket in and then some silicone around the top. So that way the back gets a really good fit. I think just for the sake of it, I'm just gonna put a little bit on here. Probably don't have to, but I'm just going to. Just a small bead. That way the pan gets a good, seals pretty good. All right, so I'm basically just gonna lower the pan over it, just real gentle like. Just lower it down. And I'm just trying to keep my eyes on all the bolt holes to make sure they're still lined up. Now what I have to do is get the metal spacers that go on this these rails that I just laid down. If you want to know which side is technically facing down, it has a little indentation that says 5.0 liter. That's how I know that this side is supposed to go this way, because that's the only side that has that writing. Now what I'm gonna do is, instead of just going through the whole thing of showing you how to bolt and torque all of these bolts down, basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a bolt here, here. I'm just gonna put them all the way down through here on each side, but then I'm gonna come back and snug them all up. But when I get ready to torque them, I'll go this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and I'll just work from my inside out until I get to all the way to the ends. That way, as I'm tightening it, it kind of pushes it out that way. But I'm gonna do that and get all these bolts in and get them torqued. I'll be torquing them at about 16 foot-pounds of pressure. I think factory's 15, 17, so I'm just go 16 all the way around.